TRIPURA RAHASYA, The Mystery Beyond Trinity, Chapter 19. After having heard Sri Dattatreya speak thus, Parshurama asked him further questions regarding the conduct and activities of the Jnanis. Lord, please tell me clearly how intellects differ according to the stages of wisdom, jnana. Is not wisdom of one kind alone, being simple, the revelations of the self? Moksha, emancipation, is the simple unfolding of the self and is alone to be sought. How can it be dependent on stages of development according to mental predispositions? Do the methods also differ in the same way? Thus asked again, Sri Datta, the ocean of mercy, began to answer his questions. I shall now tell you the secret of it all. There is no difference in the methods, nor does jnana differ in fact. The fruits differ according to the grades of accomplishment. The same extends through several births, and on its completion, jnana easily unfolds itself. The degree of efforts is according to the stage of incompleteness brought over from past births. However, jnana is eternal and no effort is really needed because it is already there and needs no accomplishment. Jnana is pure intelligence, the same as consciousness, which is ever self-radiant. What kind of efforts can avail to disclose the eternally self-resplendent consciousness? Being coated with a thick crust of infinite vasanas, dispositions, it is not easily perceived. The encrustation must first be soaked in the running stream of mind control and carefully scraped off with the sharp chisel of investigation. Then one must turn the closed urn of crystal quartz, namely the mind cleaned in the aforesaid manner, on the grinding wheel of alertness, and finally open the lid with the lever of discrimination. Lo, the gem enclosed within is now reached, and that is all. Thus you see, Ram, that all efforts are to be directed to cleaning up the mental impressions of predispositions. Intellects are cumulative effects of the predispositions acquired by karma. Effort is necessary so long as the predispositions continues to sway the intellect. The dispositions are countless, but I shall enumerate a few of the most important. They are roughly classified into three groups, namely 1. Aparada, fault. 2 is karma, action. And 3 is kama, the desire. The disposition typically of the first group is dividends towards the teachings of the Guru and the holy books, which is the surest way to degeneration. misunderstanding of the teachings due to assertiveness or pride is a phase of dividends and stands in the way of realization for learned pandits and others. Association with the wise, satsang, and the study of holy books cannot remove this misunderstanding. They maintain that there is no reality transcending the world. Even if there were, it cannot be known. If one claims to know, it is an illusion of the mind, for how can knowledge make a person free from misery or help his emancipation? They have many more doubts and wrong notions. So much about the first group. There are many more persons who cannot, however well taught, grasp the teachings. Their minds are too much cramped with predispositions to be susceptible to subtle truths. They form the second group, the victims of past actions, unable to enter the stage of contemplation necessary for annihilating the vasanas. The third group is the most common, consisting of the victims of desire who are always obsessed with the sense of duty. The desire to work for some ends. Desires are too numerous to count, since they rise up endlessly like waves in the ocean. Even if the stars are numbered, desires are not. The desires of even a single individual are countless. And what about the totality of them? Each desire is too vast to be satisfied, because it is insatiable, too strong to be resisted, and too subtle to be eluded. So the world, being in the grip of this demon, behaves madly and groans with pain and misery consequent on its own misdeeds. That person who is shielded by desirelessness, dispassion, and safe from the wiles of the monster of desire can alone rise to happiness. A person affected by one or more of the three dispositions cannot get at the truth, although it is self-evident. Therefore, I tell you that all efforts are directed towards the eradication of these innate tendencies. The first of them comes to an end on respectfully placing one's faith in holy books and the master, teacher, guru. The second may be ended only by divine grace, which may descend on the person in this birth or in any later incarnations. There is no other hope for it. The third must be gradually dealt with by dispassion, discrimination, worship of God, study of holy scriptures, learning from the wise, investigation into the self, and so on. Efforts to overcome these obstacles are more or less according to the obstacles are greater or lesser. The most important of the qualifications is the desire for emancipation. Nothing can be achieved without it. Study of philosophy and discussion on the subject with others are thoroughly useless, being no better than the study of arts. For the matter of that, one might as well hope for salvation by a study of sculpture and the practice of that art. The study of philosophy in the absence of a longing for salvation is like dressing up a corpse. Again, Ram, a casual desire for emancipation is also vain. Such desire often manifests on learning of the magnificence of the emancipated state. It is common to all but never brings about any abiding results. Therefore, a passing desire is worthless. A desire must be strong and abiding in order that it may bear fruit. The effects are in proportion to the intensity and duration of the desire. The desire must be accompanied by efforts for the accomplishment of the purpose. Then only will there be concerted effort. Just as a man scalded by fire runs immediately in search of soothing unguents and does not waste his time in other pursuits, so also must the aspirant run after emancipation to the exclusion of all other pursuits. Such an effort is fruitful and is preceded by indifference to all other attainments. Starting by discarding pleasures as being impediments to progress, he develops dispassion and then the desire for emancipation, which grows in strength. That makes a man engage in the right efforts in which he becomes thoroughly engrossed. After these stages are passed, the most unique consummation takes place. When Dattatreya finished, Parashurama was completely bewildered and asked him further, "Lord, you said earlier that association with the wise, divine grace and dispassion are the prime factors for attaining the highest aim of life. Please tell me which is the most essential and how it can be accomplished. For nothing happens without an antecedent cause. This is certain. What is the root cause of the fundamental requisite? Or is it only accidental?" Thus asked, Dattatreya answered him as follows, "I shall tell you the root cause of it all. Listen. Her transcendental majesty, the absolute consciousness, being self-contained, originally pictured the whole universe in her being, like images in a mirror. She took on the individuality named Hiranyagarbha, the creator, and considering the predispositions of the egos enclosed in that egg, Hiranyagarbha, she unfolded these scriptures, the reservoir of sublime truths, for the fulfillment of desires. Since the embryonic individuals were full of unfulfilled desires, Hiranyagarbha began to think. He began to think out the means of their fulfillment. He elaborated a scheme and cause and effect. of actions and fruits, and consequently, the individuals were born later to revolve in that wheel of cause and effect. They take different shapes and are placed in different environments consistent with their predispositions. After passing through innumerable species, the individual evolves as a human being, owing to the merit he has accumulated. At first, he will take to selfish pursuits. With growing desire, he will seek the unobstructed fulfillment of mighty ambitions. But in due course, the methods advocated in holy books will be adopted. Failures are inevitably everywhere. Disappointments result. Experts' advice is sought. Such advice will be forthcoming only from a man living in unbroken beatitude. Such a sage will, in due course, initiate the seeker in divine magnificence. The initiate's accumulated merits, reinforced by association with the wise and by divine grace, make him persist in the course and gradually take him step by step to the highest pinnacle of happiness. Now you see how association with the wise is said to be the root cause of all that is good. This happens partly through the accumulated merits of the person and partly through his unselfish devotion to God, but always as if by accident, like a fruit which has suddenly fallen from the void. Therefore, the goal of life, being dependent on so many causes, there is variety in its attainment, either according to the intellect or the predispositions of the person. The state of the jnani also differs according to as his efforts have been, great or less. Proportionately, slight effort is enough for erasing slight vasanas. He whose mind has been made pure by good deeds in successive past incarnations gains supreme results, quite out of proportion to the little effort he may make, as with Janaka. The glimpse of jnana realization gained by one whose mind is crowded with dense vasanas accumulated in past incarnations does not suffice to override one's deep-rooted ignorance. Such a one is obliged to practice samadhi, nididhyasana, or control of mind, and contemplation in successive births for effective and final realization. Thus, there are seen to be different classes of sages. O scion of Bhrigu's lineage, there are apparent differences in the characteristics of jnanis caused by the aspects and attitudes of intellect and the varieties in its activities. Such differences are quite obvious in Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer, who are jnanis by nature. That does not mean that realization, the jnana, admits of variety. These attitudes depend on their vasanas, dispositions, and environments. They are lords of the universe and all-knowing. Their jnana is pure, and uncontaminated by what they do. Whether a jnani is fair or dark in complexion, his jnana neither shares these qualities nor the qualities of the mind. See the difference in the three sons of Atri, namely Durvasa, Chandra, and myself, Dattatreya. Durvasa, said to be of the aspect of Shiva and reputed to be exceedingly irritable. Chandra, the moon, of the aspect of Brahma, had reputed to be the husband of the 27 constellations who are, in their turn, daughters of Daksha. Whereas myself, Dattatreya, of the aspect of Sriman Narayana or Vishnu, reputed to be the idol of saints, roaming nude in the forest. Vasistha, one of the greatest rishi, well known as the family preceptor of the solar line of kings, never fails in the strictest adherence to duty as prescribed by the scriptures, whereas Sanaka, Sananda, Sanat Sujata, and Sanat Kumara, 4 sons born of Brahma's volition and instructed by Narada, are types of ascetics totally indifferent to any action, including religious rites. Narada is the ideal of bhakti, devotion to God. Bhargava, Shukra, the well-known preceptor of asuras, who incessantly fight against the gods, supports the enemies of the gods, whereas the equally great sage Brihaspati, Jupiter, the preceptor of gods, supports the gods against their enemies. Vyasa is ever busy in codifying the Vedas and in propagating their truth in the shape of Mahabharata, the Puranas, and the Upapuranas. Janaka, famous as the ascetic king, Jadabharata, looking like an idiot, and many others. Now, Jadabharata was a great king who, according to the custom of the great Kshatriya emperors, abdicated his throne in favor of his son when he attained his majority and retired into the forest to do penance. On one occasion, hearing the roar of a lion, a deer in an advanced state of pregnancy took fright and leapt across the stream. Her womb was disturbed and she landed on the other shore with her young one in its placenta and dropped dead. The royal hermit took pity on the little thing, washed it, took it in his hands, and returned to the hermitage. The baby deer was carefully tended and remained always by its master's side. The hermit and the deer grew fond of each other. After some time, the hermit knew that he was dying and became anxious about the safety of the deer in the forest after his own death. He died with that thought and consequently reincarnated as a deer. Being a sage with a pious disposition, the reincarnated deer was placed in a holy environment, retaining knowledge of its past. So it did not associate with its species, but remained close to a hermitage, listening to the chanting of the Vedas and discussions on the philosophy. When it died, it was reborn as a boy in a pious Brahmin family. The parents died while he was still young. The boy was always helping others but never took any definite work. He was healthy, strong, and free from care. The neighborhood put him down as an idiot, and so he appeared as he loafed about. One night, the ruling chief of Sevilla passed in a palanquin. He was in haste to reach a renowned sage who lived in another province. One of his bearers took ill on the way, so his men looked about for a substitute. On finding this Brahmin boy, idiot, they pressed him to take the work, and he took his place as a bearer of the palanquin. The chief was irritated at the slow pace of the bearers and reprimanded them. Even after repeated warnings, the pace continued to be slow, and the chief was wild with rage. He alighted from the palanquin and found the new recruit to be the culprit, who was then thrashed and ordered to hasten. Still, there was no improvement, and the chief chided him again, but could make no impression on the idiot. The chief was exasperated, got down once again, and remonstrated with him. But he received a reply which astonished him, and further conversation convinced the chief of the idiot's greatness. So the chief became the disciple of Jadabharata, the idiot. Excuse me. There are so many others with individual characteristics, such as Chavana, Yagnevalkya, Vishwamitra. The secret is this. A king once went with the royal family and retinue for a pleasure trip into a forest which was famous as the habitation of a remarkable sage, Chavana. The young princess was playing with her companion. She came across what looked like an anthill and put a spike into one of its holes. Blood came out. She took fright and returned to the elder members of the family, but did not disclose her prank to any of them. When they had all returned home, the king and many others fell ill. They suspected some involuntary evil had been perpetrated by Chavana. When an envoy arrived in the forest praying for his blessings, the sage was found hurt in the eyes, and he sent word to the king as follows. Your daughter hurt my eyes by driving a spike into the anthill which had grown over me while I was in Samadhi. I am now old and helpless. Send the mischief maker here to make amends for her mischief by becoming my helpmate. When the envoy communicated the message to the king, he spoke to the princess, who readily assented to the wishes of the saint. So she lived in the forest with her aged consort and carefully attended to his comforts. She used to bring water from neighboring spring. One day, the twin gods, known as the Aswins, came there and, admiring her loyalty to her aged husband, revealed themselves to her and offered to rejuvenate her ancient husband. She took her husband to the spring and awaited the miracle. They asked the saint to dive into the water. They too dived simultaneously. All three emerged, looking like one another. The girl was asked to pick out her husband, She prayed to God and was enabled to identify him. The saint promised in return to include the twin benefactors among the gods eligible for sacrificial propitiation. He invited his father-in-law to arrange for a sacrifice and called on the names of Ashwins. Indra, the chief of gods, was angered by this and threatened to spoil the sacrifice if innovations of the kind contemplated by Chavana were introduced. Chavana easily incapacitated Indra by virtue of his penance and kept his promise to his benefactors. In the meantime, Indra apologized and was pardoned and restored to his former state. Yajnavalkya is the sage of sages mentioned in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Vishwamitra is too well known to be described here. He was the granduncle of Parashurama. Of the three typical vasanas mentioned, the one of the action is the most potent and is said to be ignorance. They are the best who are free from all of the vasanas, and particularly from the least trace of that of action. If free from the fault of mistrust of the teachings of the master, the vasana due to desire, which is not very serious obstruction to realization, is destroyed by the practice of contemplation. This passion need not be very marked in this case. Such people need not repeatedly engage in the study of scriptures or the receiving of instructions from the masters, but straightway pass into meditation and fall into samadhi, the consummation of the highest good. They live evermore as jivan-muktas, the emancipated ones while living. Sages with subtle and clear intellect have not considered it worthwhile to eradicate their desire by forcing other thoughts to take their place, because desires do not obstruct realization. Therefore, their desires continue to manifest even after realization as before. Neither are they tainted by such vasanas. They are said to be emancipated and diverse-minded. They are also reputed to be the best class of jnanis. Rama, he whose mind clings to the ignorance of the necessity of work, cannot hope for realization even if Shiva offers to instruct him. Similarly, also the person who has the fault of marked indifference to or misunderstanding of the teachings. On the other hand, a man only slightly affected by these two vasanas, and much more so by desires or ambitions, will be repaired. Repeated hearing of the holy truth, discussion of the same, and contemplation on it surely reach the goal, though only with considerable difficulty and after a long lapse of time. Such a sage activities will be small because he is entirely engrossed in his efforts for realization. The sage of this class has, by his long practice and rigorous discipline, controlled his mind as well that predispositions are totally eradicated and the mind is as if dead. He belongs to the middle class in the scheme of classification of sages and said to be sage without mind. The last class and the least among the sages are those who practice and discipline are not perfect enough to destroy mental predispositions. Their minds are still active, and the sages are said to be associated with their minds. They are barely jnanis and not jivanmuktas as are the other two classes. They appear to share the pleasures and pains of life like any other man and will continue to do so till the end of their lives. They will be emancipated after death. Prarabdha, past karma, is totally powerless with the middle class, who have destroyed their minds by continued practice. The mind is the soil in which the seed, namely prarabdha, sprouts. If the soil is barren, the seed loses its sprouting power and becomes useless. There are men in the world who can carefully attend to different functions at the same time and are famous and extraordinarily skillful. Again, some people attend to work as they are walking and conversing, while a teacher has an eye upon each student in the classroom and exercises control over them all. Or you yourself knew Kartabiratyajuna, who wielded different weapons in his 1,000 hands and fought with you using all of them skillfully and simultaneously. In all these cases, a single mind assumes different shapes to suit the different functions at the same time. Similarly, the mind of the best among jnanis is only the self and yet manifests as all without suffering any change in its eternal blissful nature as the self. They are, therefore, many-minded. The prarabdha of jnanis is still active and sprouts in the mind, but only to be burnt up by the steady flames of jnana. Pleasures or pain is due to the dwelling of the mind on occurrences. But if these are scorched at their source, how can there be pain or pleasure? Jnanis of the highest order, however, are seen to be active because they voluntarily bring out the vasanas from the depth of the mind and allow them to run out. Their action is similar to that of a father sporting with his child, moving its dolls, laughing at the imagined victory of one doll over another, and appearing to grieve over the injury to another, and so on. So the many-minded sages have pleasure or pain from work. The vasanas not inimical to realizations are not weeded out by the best class of jnanis because they cannot seek new ones to crowd the old one. Therefore, the old ones continue until they are exhausted, and thus You find among them some highly irritable, some lustful, and other pious and dutiful, and so on. Now the lowest order of jnani, still under the influence of their minds, know that there is no truth in the objective universe. Their samadhi is not different from that of the rest. What is samadhi? Samadhi is being aware of the self and nothing else. That is to say, it should not be confounded with the nirvikalpa, the undifferentiated state. For this state of samadhi is very common and frequent, as has been pointed out in the case of momentary samadhis. Everyone is experiencing the nirvikalpa state, though unknowingly. But what is the use of such unrecognized samadhis? A similar state becomes possible to the hatha yogis also. This experience alone does not confer any lasting benefit. But one may apply the experience to the practical affairs of life. Samadhi can only be such and such alone. Sahaja samadhi is meant here. The wise say that samadhi is the control resulting from the application of the experienced truth. To the practical affairs of life. This samadhi is possible only for jnana yogis. The hatha yogis are of two kinds. The one intent on eliminating all perturbations of the mind starts with the elimination of the non-self and gradually of all mental vacillations. This requires very long and determined practice, which becomes his second nature, and the yogi remains perfectly unagitated. The other practices the 6 preliminary exercises and then controls the breath, pranayama, until he can make the air enter the sushumna, nadi. Since the earlier effort is considerable owing to control of breath, there is a heavy strain which is suddenly relieved by the entry of air in sushumna. The resulting happiness is comparable to that of a man suddenly relieved of a pressing load on his back. His mind is similar to that of a man in a swoon or a state of intoxication. Both classes of hatha yogis experience a happiness similar to that of deep slumber. A jnani yogi, on the other hand, has theoretical knowledge of the self, for he has heard it from the guru and learned from the sastras, and has further cogitated upon the teachings. Therefore, the veil of ignorance is drawn off from him even before the consummation of samadhi. The substratum of consciousness, free from thoughts of external phenomena, is distinguished by him like a mirror reflecting images. Furthermore, in the earlier stage of samadhi, he is capable of remaining aware as absolute consciousness, quite free from all blemishes of thought. whereas a Hatha yogi cannot remain in such a state in Jnani's samadhi. Both the veil of ignorance and perturbation of thoughts are removed. In the Hatha yogi's samadhi, though the self is naturally free from the two obstacles, yet it remains hidden by the veil of ignorance. The same is torn off by the jnani in the process of his contemplation. If asked what difference there is between the samadhi of a Hatha yogi and sleep, it must be said that the mind overpowered by deep ignorance is covered by dense darkness in sleep, whereas the mind, being associated with sattva, the quality of purity, acts in samadhi as a thin veil for the self-effulgent principle. The self may compare to the sun, obstructed by dark and dense clouds in sleep, and by light mist in the samadhi. For a jnani, the self shines in its full effulgence like the sun, unobstructed in the heavens. This is how sages describe samadhi. Having spoken of the jnani's samadhi as approved by the sages, Dattatreya proceeded to prove its unbroken nature. What is samadhi? Samadhi is absolute knowledge, uncontaminated by objects. Such is the state of best jnanis, even when they take part in the affairs of the world. The blue color of the sky is known to be an unreal phenomena, and yet it appears the same to both the knowing and the unknowing, but with this difference, that the one is misled by the appearance and the other is not. Just as the false perception does not mislead the man who knows, so also all that is perceived, which is known to the wise to be false, will never mislead them. Since the middle class of jnanis have already destroyed their minds, there are no objects for them. Their state is known as the supramental one. The mind is agitated when it assumes the shape of those objects which it mistakes for real and unagitated otherwise. Therefore, the latter state alone is supramental. Since a jnani of the highest order can engage in several actions at the same time and yet remain unaffected, he is always many-minded and yet remains in unbroken samadhi. He is absolute knowledge free from objects. I have now told you all that you want to know. Thus ends the chapter on the different states of jnanis in Tripura Rahasya.